Welcome to Dobby's Repairs. I'm Dobby the Fixing Elf. In this video I'll show you how to change the alternator on a 2010 Mk2 Ford Focus with a 1.6 turbo diesel engine. So let's get into it. Normally the first step would be to disconnect the battery, but the battery's been removed so it can go on charge where we do the repair. The next step is to remove the engine cover. It's held on usually by two 10mm bolts, but one was missing here, so we can remove the one that we got in there. It's quite a quick and straightforward job. Just then crack it loose with a ratchet and then just run it off by hand. And once we have the bolt off, we'll just remove the cover, just lift off, and we'll put it somewhere safe. A couple of connectors to remove from the throttle body. So here's the first one. They're quite simple. You just lift up the tab and give them a little tug up, as you see me do here. You can do these one-handed normally, as you can see me doing. I'll remove the second one that's down the bottom here. Again, just lift up and give it a tug. And now there's a little bit of cable being held onto a bolt that we need to remove. So we just get this cable off by giving it a tug off the bolt. It's quite a long bolt, as you can see there. And yeah, now we've got all the cables disconnected. We'll do a bit of management and we'll start removing the next bolts we need to remove. The first bolt we're going to remove is 30mm that holds down the wiring harness. This is also the one that the 10mm nut come off that holds down the engine cover. So we're just going to whip this off quickly. Use a deep socket or a spanner if you haven't got a deep socket. Once you get it loose, just take it out by hand. Doesn't take too long at all. And yeah, that's that bit off and out the way. Freeze up the wiring harness a bit more. Now we're going to remove a couple of 8mm, starting with this one here. There's three 8mm on the throttle body housing, so we're just going to start taking them off. You have to use a ratchet for two of them and a spanner for a deep socket for the third one. I used, as I said, a ratchet for the top two, and then a deep spanner for the third one. Yeah, just get it off, and here we are with the spanner now. So just get the spanner on there and crack it loose. It doesn't take much to get it loose, and just work out by hand after that. And as you see, it's coming out nicely, and that's out now. Now we can move on to the next 8mm bolt, which is down here. To get this 8mm, we just need to use an extension and just break it loose, as you can see me doing here. And then we'll quickly run it out by hand. It doesn't take too much, luckily. Get it down here, and we'll get it off. We'll get the cable out of the way, of course. So that's out now. And then we'll move on to the next 8mm bolt, which is just over here, under the front of it. So you're facing from the radiator side. As you can see, just to the back there. Just use the extension again. And just break it loose nice and easily. We are quite stiff, but not as stiff. And there we go, it's broken loose. And we'll just carry on doing what we did before. And just work it out. And yeah, after a little while, you'll get the bolt out. As you can see me do here. Here it comes. Just another 8mm. Now we can move on to removing the rest of the throttle body itself. So we just need to remove this 7mm Jubilee clamp down at the bottom here. You can also use a flat-bladed screwdriver for this as well. But once you get it out, you get loose, just give it a wiggle and it will start coming loose. Just remove some cables out the way. And yeah, just give it another wiggle. And we'll just get it off. There's one more cable attached to the bottom of it that we need to remove. Once we get it round, we'll get it out. Remove the cable out of the way again. It is a bit tricky to get out, but it doesn't take that long. And after a bit of wiggling, we already get the air intake pipe off of the throttle body and be able to get to the last cable that we need to remove the throttle body. So it's just underneath here, so we'll flip it over. And here's the connector. It's a very similar one. You push it in and just give it a tug down and it will pop off. And there it's off now. We can move on to the next part now. The next job is to remove the belt tensioner. So we get a 16mm spanner and just hook it over this top part of the tensioner. And then we take a 4mm drill bit or a similar sized object and slip it in a little hole to hold the tensioner open so we can remove it without it being tensioned on the belt. So you can see that the belt is now holding tension. It's quite hard to do with one hand and filming, but it's a lot easier when you're not filming. And as you see, the drill bit's in place and that'll hold the tension in nicely. So we can start removing the three 10mm bolts that'll hold the tensioner onto the engine. So we'll start here with this one. Just break it loose and remove it. You can see I just knocked it with my thing. Ratchet, but now we're moving to the second one. And then we'll just take the first one out by hand and get it out. And then do the same for the second one with a socket, should I say. And just work that one out. Nice and simple, just work it out by hand, just get it out. And then we've got one more to do, which is down the bottom here, which is a bit tougher, but after a little bit of degree pokery with different tools, you can get it off. It's probably easier to loosen this one before you take the belt tension off, but after a little while you'll get it off, and it'll come out nice and easily. As you can see, we're getting it out now. And that's all 3 bolts removed from the tensioner. Now we can lift the tensioner out, and the belt should be loose now. So there's the tensioner. You are spring loaded, so be careful with these because they can hurt if you are not careful. Now just hook the belt off the alternator. Try and keep it on the rest of the pulleys if you can. It's quite difficult to do, but the belt does go back on quite simply. And yeah, once that's off, we can start by removing the 2 16mm fasteners at the front of the engine. So these 2 hold the front of the alternator on. They come off fairly simply. Just get your ratchet on there and just break them loose and just work them out as you do any other fastener or bolt. And yeah, just get this one off, and then we'll move on to the bottom one. I had to use a slightly different socket, just a bit extra leverage. So this is a deep socket, just so I got the reach. And yeah, after a while you can work them both out, and then as you can see, that one's out now. And now we'll remove the 2 bolts, just pull them out the rest of the way by hand. Get the first one out, and we'll come back in and get the second one. And yeah, they come out fairly simply. They're not overly tight, luckily. There's enough space to get your hand in there. And now we'll move on to removing the 2 connectors that hold the electrical part of the alternator. So there's one under this rubber cap, which is a 30mm, and we also have a plastic connector that's another one we need to remove. So just squeeze it and give it a tug, and it'll come off. Can be quite hard to reach down there, but you'll get there in the end. And then we'll get the 30mm sprocket on here and remove this connector. Just work it down nice and easily. Get it off. This can be quite tricky. I did manage to luckily take the knot off in the socket, so just quickly get it up, and there's the nut. And then we can just disconnect the cable from the alternator. Just give it a good old wiggle, and it comes nice and loose, as you can see here. And now we need to remove 2 16mm, well not remove, but loosen up 2 16mm nuts on the back of the alternator. I say the nuts are actually bolts, and they have little splines on them to spread out when you tighten them up. You don't need to remove them completely, just loosen them up a couple of turns and they'll come off. This is the top one I'm doing now, and as you can see, this is the bottom one. I didn't film it because it's really tough to get filming and removing, but once you work that one off, you can remove the alternator itself by giving it a gentle wiggle. The easiest way I found to remove the alternator you just give it a pull towards the wing, and then just quickly work it out, and then you can see it will start coming loose. Now once it's loose, we just need to remove the 2 dowel pins, the 2 16mm we loosened up earlier. So we'll just get it around in the right position so we can get access to them, and we'll take them off. Just makes it easier for getting it out for the hole. It does a bit tricky, it's quite tight in space, but we just have to flip things around, and then you can see me get to the first one. And we just need to work it off. They are still a bit tight, so we'll get a ratchet on it and just loosen it off. And yeah, just take these 2 off, makes it easier for getting it out. And then I'll give you a closer look at them. As you can see, they're sort of split. Well, now you can see they're sort of split, and that's what tightens it when you tighten it up. We'll just get the other one off too. Again, quite simple, quite easy to get off. Once it's out of the way, we can move on to removing the alternator itself. Just wiggle it out. It's a bit tricky, but you can get it out after a while. As you can see it here, and here it comes. Now the alternator is removed. We can move on to comparing it to the other one. So here's the new alternator, and you notice there's a slight difference in the pulleys. This is actually the correct pulley for the car. The old one wasn't the correct pulley, but we'll get it in. If you do need to change the pulley, there is an instruction on how to do that, and this is the gap we're going to be putting it back into. And you can see there's the holder for it, just to the back there. And we're going to slide it back in. It can be quite tricky, but no, once you get it back in, we can start tightening up the dowels again. Just put them back in the back of the alternator, the same way we removed them. And we just get them in, and then we need to lift it up and wiggle it back in. It will just hook back into place, back into the holes where it came from. Once you get the second dowel back in place, and yeah, just keep working them in. You can see here that's nice and tight now, so we can start putting it back in. And again, this is just push it back towards the engine, and you'll feel it slot into place. You can try and tighten the back one first. I find it easier to tighten the first ones, and that's the front ones first, should I say. That's what I'll do now. So we'll swap over and we'll put the first alternator bolt back in once the cable gets out of the way. And yeah, just quickly work in. Just get in and then we'll put the bottom one in as well. As you can see here, going in nicely. And then we'll start tightening them down with a ratchet. Where they both are, just tighten in with fingers first. Always start your bolts with your hand first so you don't cross thread. And then we'll just tighten them down nicely. And after a little while we'll get them both tightened down. Well, the top one to tighten down, I'm going to move on to the bottom one. Again, it takes a few minutes to do this. I've just cut a few bits out to save time. You don't want to really watch me tighten up a bolt. They're both in. And let's get a ratchet in there to make sure they're fully tight. Again, luckily we're not overly tight. Just get them snug down. I'm going to use the spanner for the bottom one just because I couldn't get the right angle on it for some weird reason. I don't know why it came out easily, but we'll just get them nice and tight. Then we can move on to the next part. So once that's in, we'll start tightening the back ones again. And now that's the front one completely tightened down, we'll move on to the back ones. Again, you don't need to turn these very much, just a couple of turns will get them nice and snug. That's all you need, just get them snug down. And yeah, just get them in there and just, could be quite tricky to reach, but I just use a spanner, easier with an open end spanner I found. There might be a different tool for doing this, it makes it a lot easier. Now we can move on to reconnecting the electrical connectors, starting with the 30mm to pop the cable back on, and then we'll get our 30mm nut back in place. We'll tighten it down with the ratchet and the extension again. There we are, that's on, and now here comes the ratchet and the extension, and just tighten it down nicely. And yeah, that goes on nicely and tight. And it's a simple matter of plugging the connector back on. Just a nice quick simple click, and it goes back into place. You'll hear it pop quite easily. And now we can put the rubber cover back on, and then we can move on to the next step of which is getting the belt and the belt tensioner back in place. So the first thing we need to do is get the belt back on. Just hook it over the alternator and over any pulleys that it may come off of. If you're lucky, then it won't have gone too far. You won't have to do too much. And then we get the tensioner back in place. Be careful of the drill bit. I used a slightly too big one here, really. I should have used a smaller one. But once we get it in place, we can put a couple of bolts in and get it all tightened down nice and easily. So if we get the first bolt in and just get it started by hand, and then we'll get the other ones in. You can see they're all started by hand now, and we're just going to start tightening them down with the ratchet. So that one's tightened down, and then we'll get the second one tightened down and the third one tightened down, like you just see me doing here. To go back and double check, make sure they're nice and tight. You don't want to lose tension up these bolts. Yeah, as you can see, once they're all on, we can move on to using the 16mm spanner to loosen the tension off. Take the tension off the tension, should I say, and then remove the drill bit. Again, this can be quite tricky, especially with the drill bit in place, but after a while you get them nice and get the right spot, and then you'll be able to remove the drill bit, and it'll put the tension back on the belt, as you can see me do here. And now tension goes back on the belt. It's always a good idea once you put the tension back on the belt, and you get the spanner out of the way first, because they can get stuck like this one has. I could have done with a slightly shorter 16mm spanner for this. But once that's in place, you can just check, make sure the belt's not loose or off anywhere, and then we can move on to putting throttle body back in place. So we'll start by connecting this bottom connector. Just plugs in nice and simply, as you can see me doing here. And once that's back in place, we'll wiggle it back into the right spot under the cables and everything. You see it goes back in nicely and easily, and then we'll put it back into the intake pipe. Just get it nice in there. We won't tighten it down just yet. We'll get some other bits in place before we start tightening that down. And you can see it's in there nicely now. And now we're going to start lining things up. Plug in a few more connectors, as you can see me doing here. And then we'll get the first of the 8mm bolts back in. This is the one you had to use the spanner on before. Just get it in finger tight first. Not even finger tight, just work it in so it's in place and it holds everything in line. Then we'll move on to the second 8mm bolt that holds the throttle body housing on the intake there, and here comes the third one. Just get these all started up nice and easily. Yeah, we'll get these in, and we'll start tightening down the 7mm at the bottom there. Yeah, nice and quick. Just get it tightened down. Don't want to over tighten these because you can break the throttle body because it's only made out of plastic. And then we'll start tightening down these 8mm, starting with the two at the top, and then in a minute we'll get the spanner and tighten down the other one. So this one's going on nicely now. We just had to use a bit of extension to make sure we get it nice and tight. and finally get the spanner in place and get the last 8mm tightened down. As you can see, it doesn't take much, nice and tight. And now I'll put this 8mm back in on the side here, again using an extension. And here we come with the extension disc again to make sure it's nice and tight. And yeah, we'll just work this in nice and easily. And that's nice and tight now. We'll move on to the last 8mm we need to put back in, using a bit of a rubber glove on the end of the socket so the bolt doesn't drop down. Or a useful trip if you haven't used it before. And you just work it nice and tight, and just start it by hand first of all. And then remove it, and you can see there's a bit of a rubber glove, and we'll just tighten that one down too. And there we go, that's all tightened down now. We'll move on to putting back in the 13mm that we removed earlier. So just quickly wiggle it into place, and then start tightening it down by hand. And yeah, once that's done, get it nice and tight by hand, and then we'll get our deep 30mm socket, and we'll tighten it down properly. Make sure you don't forget to put your wiring harness back underneath it as well. Once that's tight, we can grab the engine cover and tighten down, once you get the right way around, tighten down the last 10mm fastener we need to tighten down. And yeah, that should be done now, and that'll go in nice and easily. You can see here, tighten it down with a socket, and then we can move on to putting the battery back in, giving it a quick test, as you'll see me doing in a few moments, once this is all tightened down. As you can see, we have 14.4 volts, which is perfect, and that's how you replace the alternator on a 2010 Ford Focus with a 1.6 diesel engine. If you enjoyed this video, why not drop a like? Any questions or feedback? Let me know in the comments. I normally drop 2 videos a week, so if you haven't subbed to the channel yet, you should, and then you'll never miss another video. Do you know anyone else who would enjoy watching this video? Then feel free to share it with them. Thanks for watching until the end. Have a sensational day.